Hey everybody, I'm Aslan Hutchavani, joined by Ira Schofel, managing editor of Warchant.com and Warchant.com's lead senior writer, Corey Clark. Website is Warchant.com. Promo code's Warchant30. Use it for 30 free days of access to the website. Bottom right corner of the screen. I get everything backwards because it flips everything. Anyhow, hit the thumbs up button. Say that you like the video. Subscribe to the YouTube page as well. All right, gentlemen, so this is our little off-season exercise. A paradise, a utopia, if you will, where everything works out in Florida State favor. We talked about possibly Mackenzie Milton taking the starting quarterback job and performing at the ability he showed when he was at UCF and a Heisman candidate amidst his national championship season. So they got a guy from the SEC, Ira, pass rusher, position of need, Jermaine Johnson. What if, I don't know, do we want to throw a number out there, Ira, but what if he is an effective pass rusher, a disruptive force, somewhere between, like, I don't know, DeMarcus Walker and a Brian Burns in their final season in Tallahassee? What does that mean for the defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think the premise here is what if he's like an All-American? We obviously know he's going to be an upgrade over what they had last season, the last couple seasons, and what they would have had if he didn't come. So we know he's a huge upgrade, but what if he's like an All-American type guy, like you said, like a DeMarcus Walker or better than that? And, obviously it changes a lot for that defense. I mean, it's been several years now that Florida State has not gotten much production out of its defensive ends, going back to Brian Burns a few years ago. I guess that would be my one concern is it's not like when Brian Burns was there pressuring the quarterback that fixed everything for the defense, but it's obviously a lot better than what they had. I mean, I think combined the defensive ends last year had like maybe 3 sacks as a group last season. So if Jermaine Johnson comes in and is a guy that has 10, 11, 12 sacks, which is possible. You look at he had 5 sacks in basically half of the snaps last year at Georgia, then, I mean, it's a big difference. But I guess that would be my question to you guys is Brian Burns didn't turn that into a great defense by himself. So what could Jermaine Johnson do?
Well, my counter to that would be, but Brian Burns' defense wasn't what 2020 was. Like you saw what a defense in 19 really, but 2020 you saw what a defense is like where it has no pass rush, none. Like that 2018 defense with Brian Burns flying around, it was still bad, but it wasn't historically bad. It wasn't impossible to watch bad, and that's what the 2020 Florida State defense was. It was impossible to watch. I mean, every number, every single measure, they were awful in. Sacks, passing efficiency defense, rush defense. This guy is they didn't have a difference maker up front last year. I think we all agree, even if he doesn't have an All-American season, if he has an All-ACC second team season, that's still so much better than what they've been getting from that position. We won't even know how to account for it. And if you actually have a defensive end where you got a chip, where you got to hold in a running back to help, or you got to hold in a tight end to help, well, that helps the whole defense. If you got to double team one guy, this dynamic player, I think that helps the whole defense. I don't think, we know it helps the whole defense, and that's something they've been missing since Brian Burns. But yeah, I don't think they're going to take a leap from like 107 in the country to 40. But if he can get them to 69 or 70, I don't know why I threw that number out there. If he can get them to 70, that's they're still not going to be good at all. But that's probably worth an extra win or two. Just going from god awful to mediocre probably keeps you in a couple games where you might win it.
I was so positive going to this video, Ira, and then you, of all people, now got me all cynical because I think that's a really salient point about, I mean, how much difference can one player make? But I guess my counter to that would be, I think in this day and age in college football, if you could only have one guy that's elite on your defense, you probably wanted to be a pass rusher, though, right? So I would hope that, to Corey's point, that would lead to another win or two. Because, get off the field on a third down, right? Just get off the field 1 or 2 extra third downs a game that you weren't able to last season. I mean, that Louisville game got away from them quickly, but they set up a 3rd and long, I think, on Louisville's first drive of the game. You get them off the field, you score that possession, and that's a completely different game. So maybe that's what we're kind of holding out hope for.
Yeah, and I think, you also think about it in concert. If Keir Thomas, the transfer from South Carolina, is effective as well, now that gives you, that's a big deal. You can't just have the one guy. It would be nice if you have a second guy to really complement him at the other side of the line. But yeah, I mean, I think Jermaine Johnson, one other interesting thing about him from the spring was, I don't know how many times Mike Norvell made this point, Adam Fuller made this point, I think John Papuchis, how impressed they were with the way he played the run. And I don't know that we got a great vision of that during spring practice. but they also know what they're looking for a little bit more than we do by the drills they're doing in the assignments. But that's a big deal also because FSU's run defense, as Corey said, has been terrible as well. And that's not just on the linebackers. That's not just on the interior. A lot of times that's on the defensive ends. So if he's a guy that can help in that area as well. The one question I would have, and I know we're looking at the what ifs. We're going with the rainbows and the pretty the skies. It isn't like Jermaine Johnson, was unbelievable at Georgia. Now, what would make him unbelievable here? Is it just being on the field that many snaps, being a fifth year senior, just having that experience, or are we overvaluing him a little bit based on who he's playing with?
Yeah, I think with him though, I was going to make this point. I think the first what if we did was what if Mackenzie Milton turns into the guy we saw in 2017, 2018. I'm more confident in this what if than I am that what if. I just watching him in the spring, and I know he's not going up against the Cowboys offensive line. I get it. But what he did to all those poor Florida State offensive linemen, it was like what Brian Burns did before his last year. It was utter domination. They couldn't block him. So if you have a guy like that, and obviously he's going to go up against some better players, but if you have a guy like that that's almost unblockable or can be unblockable at times, especially getting to the passer, that changes everything. It makes it easier for the DBs. Clearly, they don't have to cover guys for 7 seconds. The ball has to come out of the quarterback's hand quicker. That can lead to some more turnovers. Also, as Aslan pointed out in the Louisville game, it's not illegal to get a team behind the chains. Imagine your defense if it's bad, but it gets a bunch of 3rd and 16s that it has to defend instead of 3rd and 3s. All that, if you can do that twice a game, that can change the whole complexion of a game. But yeah, I do think a lot of it was when you just look at the snaps he played at Georgia. They just deemed him to be a 3rd down player. He clearly thinks he's more than that. That's why he's not at Georgia. So you look at those numbers he played, 15, 39, 31, 31, 16, 35, 22. He'll be playing 65 snaps a game for this team. So it'll be interesting to see what the production does, because if you just align his production with his number of snaps and double it at what he did at Georgia, then you're talking about a guy that would have had 11 and a half sacks, which is All-American caliber. So I think the thinking is he's just going to play like he did at Georgia, but play more snaps, I guess.
Well, and if I'm just listening to this, if I haven't seen him up close in person, you might wonder, okay, well, how's the production translate if he gets that many snaps? I mean, physically, from a physical standpoint, he looks as capable to play 60, 70 snaps as anybody we've seen at Florida State in many years, other than maybe like Brian Burns. The durability is a little bit of a question we'd have to see. He got banged up a couple times in the spring. The other thing he brings that we haven't touched on, it's hard to quantify, but I think all of us from our interactions with him during the spring and what we've heard about him is he's an A++ in terms of, locker room leadership, determination. He's very focused. He's not just a guy who's coming here to get some sacks and move on. He seems like he's really embraced the team mindset. He wants to be a leader. So that's something too. It's a little special sauce, I think, that he could give this team that, maybe even I don't know, maybe a Brian Burns, some guys like that who didn't. DeMarcus Walker was very much, not that he's a bad guy. He just was a guy that was a little bit more focused on DeMarcus Walker. Wasn't necessarily a guy that everybody rallied around. Jermaine Johnson could be that kind of guy that elevates other players as well.
Yeah, that's a nice intangible to have, but I think everybody watching this would be like, man, I don't care if he knows any of the coaches or players' names. If he gets 12 sacks, that's all we care about. If he might not know the guy next to him, anything about him. But yes, that was the surprising thing about the spring was that the way they did talk about him as a teammate, because he seemed like his situation seemed very like a mercenary. Like I think I'm a great player. I want to go to play where I can get my numbers up so I can go get up my draft stock, which it's his right to do. And that's the main reason he's at Florida State. But he did seem to buy into everything. It wasn't just, I'm here for me. I'll be out of here in December. I'm just going to try to make the most of this. He really seemed to buy into being a Florida State Seminole, which, that's pie in the sky type stuff, but it can be important, especially with a lot of young guys that he's going to be working with.
11 pressures in 7 games. Surely he'll be asked to do more than that and produce more than that. Should I throw a number out there like 10.5?
He also had 5 sacks. He did have 5 sacks. I know PFF has him as 4, but he did have 5 in the official stats. So do with that what you will. And I'm a big pressure guy, Aslan. I'm a huge QB pressure guy. I care about that more than anyone. We're gonna have to up those numbers. He had 4 in one game though. That's impressive. That's good stuff.
I think but the other thing about, and not to, just make excuses for the guy, but part of being a really good pass rusher is that down to down sequencing against offensive tackles, like setting them up, showing different things. I think it's got to be a challenge unless you're just a complete freak that where nobody can even touch you. It's got to be hard to come in every 4 or 5 snaps because you haven't built anything with that offensive tackle. So, he may improve more than we even think.
And Corey, you've watched some Georgia football, and you've mentioned it before on multiple platforms because you're a busy man, many things you do. But the Georgia defense really didn't call for him to be that kind of pin your ears back, one singular focus thing. And we assume with his drive and his dedication, his desire to be in the NFL, and he realized that this is his year, we'll see much more of that. And that was probably part of the sales pitch too to get him here to Florida State. It was like, hey man, we're gonna turn you into a one-dimensional thing. But I know, Ira's talking about he can defend the run good as well, that's important. But pressure the quarterback.
Well, a hand in the dirt. He there were a lot of times he was standing up. He covered in space sometimes. I think this is going to be more of a traditional, obviously 4-3 defensive end. But yeah, he does it. I don't think he's going to be one-dimensional. I think they want him on the field a lot. Georgia just wanted him basically in passing downs, whether it was covering somebody out in the flat or going and getting the quarterback. Florida State wants him in there on every down. And, at the NFL, he's going to have to do that. So this is his chance to do it. But yeah, it was odd that Georgia didn't use him more than they did. But hopefully that's Florida State's, it's good for Florida State. And I think it will be. Again, like I said, I think this is much more doable, him becoming an all-conference type 11 or 12 sack guy than – and I'm not trying to – Mackenzie Milton could happen too. But I think just from what we watched in the spring, don't you think this is probably a little bit more likely that Jermaine Johnson is a really good college defensive end as opposed to Mackenzie Milton looked like he did in 17 and 18?
Yeah, I would say so.
Ira, you're just staring at me.
I'm contemplating. I'm not 100% sold on that, but that's not the point of this video, Corey. You've just taken us on a tangent, and I was trying to not go there, but you're not going to let me.
My fault.
Stay in the lane. Stay in the lane.
They're both going to happen. They're both going to happen. We're going to the Rose Bowl.
Going to the Rose. Any last final thoughts before we wrap things up, Ira?
No, sir. I'm good. This one. I think we've all had our say. It's all been good, and I'm good to go.
You folks at home, if you want to imagine the next scenario that could help Florida State in 2021, what if? Let us know. Go to the Tribal Council, tweet at us, all that sort of stuff, social media at Warchant. For Ira and Corey, I'm Aslan. Thanks for watching this edition of Warchant TV.